Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Julie Schenecker. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Julie Powers Schenecker was born on January 13, 1961, in Muscatine, Iowa. She lived with her father Jim, her mother Pat, as well as an older brother and a younger sister. Julie's father was an electrical engineer. In school, Julie performed well academically. In 1978, she graduated from high school and went on to college. In 1982, Julie earned a bachelor's degree in physical education and coaching. After college, Julie joined the Army, where she was assigned to the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center. She studied Russian and Russian culture. In 1987, after becoming fluent in Russian, Julie was assigned to the 18th Military Intelligence Battalion in Munich, Germany. Her job title was Human Intelligence Collector. During this same year, 1987, Julie met a second lieutenant named Parker Schenecker, and the couple became romantically involved. On October 10, 1992, Julie and Parker married in New Orleans, Louisiana. Only after the wedding did Julie mention to Parker that she had been suffering from symptoms of depression for quite some time. The couple returned to Germany and continued their service in the Army. In 1994, Julie left military service to focus on being a mother. On September 12 of that year, she had a daughter named Calix. For Parker's job in the Army, the family moved to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. After this, they made their way to Hawaii. On September 29, 1997, Julie had a son named Beau. She experienced postpartum depression, which was quite severe. The family continued the pattern of frequent moving. They ended up in Woodbridge, Virginia, then Columbia, Maryland. In 2001, Julie was hospitalized for depression and remained inpatient for 9 months. Supposedly, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizoaffective disorder. This is technically not possible because schizoaffective disorder features all the symptoms of bipolar disorder combined with the symptoms of schizophrenia. If a person is diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and that diagnosis is correct, they do not have bipolar disorder. I've seen this mistake made many times, especially with inexperienced or poorly trained clinicians. Years later, Julie was diagnosed with just bipolar disorder with psychotic features. In 2002, the Army sent Parker back to Germany. By this point, he was a lieutenant colonel. A few years later, Julie decided to stop taking her medication, which led to her being hospitalized in early 2006. In August of that same year, Parker was promoted to colonel. The family moved to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. In 2007, they moved again, this time to Tampa, Florida. In May 2008, they paid $448,000 for a 3,300 square foot 4-bedroom house on Royal Park Court. Julie continued to suffer from mental health symptoms, including depression, but from the perspective of outside observers, it appeared as though she was functioning reasonably well. She was active in her community as she supported Calix and Beau in various school activities, like sports. Behind the scenes, however, Julie was becoming increasingly irritated by her children. Her frustration tolerance was very low. In early October 2010, Julie struck her daughter Calix repeatedly with an open hand for a period of 30 seconds. On November 2, Calix reported the attack to a mental health counselor, who in turn reported it to the police. Law enforcement paid a visit to Julie on November 6, 2010, and she admitted to striking her daughter. Despite this, no charges were filed against Julie. The police said that Julie was permitted to discipline her daughter using physical force, as long as no injuries were caused. Any injury that Calix may have sustained had already healed by this point, so the police did not know if she had been injured or not. Even though Julie was not charged, the Florida Department of Children and Families still investigated. They had concerns about what was happening between Julie and her children. On November 8, 2010, just 2 days after being visited by the police, Julie slammed her Mercedes into a trailer carrying landscaping equipment, which was being pulled by a truck. The police noticed that Julie showed signs of being impaired by substances. She was taken to a hospital for treatment. The police intended to have her tested for substances, but by the time they arrived at the hospital, Julie was already gone. Having missed their opportunity to determine the presence of any substances, Julie was only charged with careless driving. Despite escaping responsibility for allegedly driving under the influence, Julie acknowledged that she had a substance use problem. She spent 21 days in a substance use treatment center in Clearwater, Florida, where she was treated for alcohol and OxyContin use. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 11, 2011, Julie's husband Parker received orders for deployment to the Middle East. On January 18, the Florida Department of Children and Families determined that Julie's children were safe in their home environment. In their assessment, there was nothing to worry about. They were positive that everything was going to be fine with the family. One thing was for certain: the children were perfectly safe when being cared for by Julie. On Saturday, January 22, 2011, Julie traveled to a gun store in Oldsmar, Florida, and purchased a Smith & Wesson Bodyguard .38 caliber 5-shot revolver. She told the employees she needed the weapon because there had been home invasions in her neighborhood. Julie was required to answer questions on an ATF Form 4473, as prescribed by federal law. She had an active substance use problem, yet lied on the form saying she did not. She pulled what is sometimes referred to as a Hunter Biden. Julie picked up the firearm on January 27. There is a waiting period in Florida for people purchasing handguns without a concealed carry permit. One day later, on Friday, January 28, 2011, Julie's mother, Pat, contacted the police in Tampa, Florida, and requested a welfare check on Julie. Pat believed that Julie was depressed and was worried because Julie was not answering her phone. Julie's 2 children were not answering their phones either. At 7:49 a.m., the police arrived at Julie's house on Royal Park Court. In the backyard, the police found Julie on the concrete next to her swimming pool. They asked her if she was injured. Julie replied no. The officers asked, "Where are your children?" Julie pointed toward the rear door of the house and said, "They're inside." The police entered the house, where they found Julie's 16-year-old daughter, Calyx, dead in her bedroom. She had been shot with Julie's .38 caliber revolver. In the garage, officers found Julie's 13-year-old son, Beau, buckled into the passenger seat of a Honda Odyssey minivan. He had been killed using the same method. Julie was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. She told the police that one day earlier, on January 27, 2011, she was in the Honda with her son, Beau. During the drive, she produced the revolver and shot through the windshield. She then shot Beau in the head twice. Julie claimed that she killed her son because he talked back to her. After arriving home, Julie entered her daughter's bedroom and approached her from behind as she was working at a desk. Julie killed her daughter by shooting her twice in the head and moved her body to the bed. On April 28, 2014, Julie went to trial. Her attorneys argued that she did not know the difference between right and wrong when she killed her 2 children. On May 15, 2014, she was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her sentence was 2 terms of life in prison to be served concurrently. In Florida, life in prison means life without the possibility of parole. Now moving to my analysis. Julie Schenecker maintains her innocence, and she has a few supporters. They argue that Julie was legally insane when she shot and killed her 2 children. One of her attorneys argued that Julie was trapped in the claws of bipolar disorder. The state, of course, disagrees. They argued that Julie planned the murders, and she realized her behavior was morally wrong. In the state of Florida, a defendant who claims insanity must prove, by clear and convincing evidence, that they did not know what they were doing, or they did not understand what they were doing was wrong. This burden of proof is on the defense. With this in mind, was Julie guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Julie purchased the revolver 5 days before killing her children. In her journal, she detailed her homicidal plans and referred to those plans with the word evil. She expressed disappointment at being bound by the waiting period to pick up the firearm when she wrote, quote, "I was planning a Saturday massacre, but had to wait on the waiting period," unquote. At the time of the killings, Julie had been using substances, but voluntary intoxication is prohibited as a basis for an insanity claim. Julie left a note on the door of her house telling people that her family left on vacation to New York. This was done to prevent anyone from discovering what she had done. Julie was trying to conceal her behavior. If she did not understand her behavior was wrong, why would she be concerned about being discovered? 3 mental health experts hired by the state testified that Julie knew the difference between right and wrong. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Julie had a long history of severe mental illness, including bipolar disorder with psychotic features. The symptoms were so severe, she required hospitalization. All 6 mental health experts who testified at her trial, including the 3 hired by the state, agreed that Julie was mentally ill. The 3 clinicians hired by the defense said that Julie did not understand the difference between right and wrong. Although her record of medication compliance was far from perfect, Julie had taken many different psychotropic medications over the years. This is consistent with her trying to alleviate her symptoms. Julie appeared to suffer from tardive dyskinesia. This is a disorder characterized by involuntary and repetitive muscle movements, which can be caused by various medications, including antipsychotics. Julie paid a heavy price for attempting to battle with her mental illness. When a mother kills her own child, it is referred to as maternal filicide. Research tells us that bipolar disorder and postpartum depression are overrepresented among those perpetrators. Individuals who are psychotic, that is, who have hallucinations and/or delusions, are separated from reality. They may not understand the difference between right and wrong. Maternal filicide involving psychosis is associated with specific motives, including the false belief by the mother that she is preventing her child from suffering. This is called the altruistic type. Julie claimed that she was trying to protect her 2 children, which is consistent with this type. Some other motives do not have an association with psychosis, but these motives did not apply to Julie's situation. For instance, she did not kill her children because she viewed them as an obstacle to a romantic relationship or a desired lifestyle, and it does not appear as though she killed them in order to get revenge on her spouse. At the time of the killings, Julie's behavior was bizarre. For example, after killing her daughter, she tried to manipulate her daughter's face into a smile. And instead of running away, Julie stayed by her pool in her backyard. Julie's voluntary use of substances represented a problem for her defense, but she may have simply been trying to do the best that she could to control the symptoms. Perhaps this was just her way of trying to get better. It wasn't malicious, rather it was simply misguided. When considering all the factors in this case, do I believe that Julie was guilty of murder? Yes, in my opinion, she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The premeditation and the voluntary substance use are devastating to Julie's case. If it weren't for these 2 factors, I would have said that Julie proved, by clear and convincing evidence, that she was legally insane. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Julie developed bipolar disorder with psychotic features. In addition, in 2002, she was diagnosed with unspecified personality disorder. Julie frequently maintained magical thinking. For instance, in early 2008, she became mesmerized by the New Age nonsense broker Eckhart Tolle. Sometimes Julie would move from magical thinking all the way to experiencing delusions. Bipolar disorder often features periods of relatively stable functioning, interrupted by devastating manic and depressive episodes. This can lead to a false sense of security. Between episodes, a person may feel like they have recovered. They think to themselves that the disorder will never return, and there is no need for continued counseling or medication. They might make big plans, like finding a new job or starting a romance, only to be dragged back to reality when the next episode strikes. For a disorder that features hard-to-miss symptoms like mania, it is remarkably insidious. Bipolar disorder is a particularly cruel illness, as I've mentioned in other videos. I have seen it devastate many people's lives over the years. From an outside perspective, people may draw the same false conclusion about recovery as the person with the disorder. For instance, many acquaintances of Julie thought that she was fine for long periods of time in her life. They had no idea that she was struggling with such severe symptoms. Officials from the Department of Children and Families missed the danger as well, despite having been trained to identify mental health symptoms. Ultimately, Julie fell into a pattern of using substances which only made her symptoms worse. She became delusional and murdered her children. It was Julie's responsibility to remain compliant with her treatment, and she failed. Julie continues to argue that she is innocent, but in this case, the distinction between innocence and guilt is academic. She needs to be separated from society for the rest of her life, either way. Those are my thoughts on the case of Julie Schenecker. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.